Greetings and salutations. You are listening to the Into the North podcast, where we take a look at the competitive side of the Commander format, also known as cEDH. I'm one of your hosts, Lyndon, aka Noobzors, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts Reed, aka Sick Robot.
How you doing?
And Morgan, aka Spleenface.
What's up, everyone?
And in this episode, we will be covering dun 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 under pressure. Yeah, talking about pressure.
Let's see if we can. I was about to say, let's see if we can get copyright stricken from doing the acapella.
Definitely, vocal skills are not good enough to get copyright stricken.
I think we're safe.
Yeah. So we'll be talking about pressure in cEDH and its various forms and how to deal with it and how to exert more pressure. But before we get into that, what have you guys been up to since the last episode?
I guess this is just personal stuff in general. So you went to a tournament and we didn't go. So how'd that go? And what was it? And everything.
So as has been mentioned, I think a couple times, this was the third time one of us has, or any of us have gone to the Bufftown Bullies. No, or was it third?
Yeah.
It was third. Okay.
It was third. Yeah.
Which, shout out Tad, freaking awesome tournament series that they put on.
Tad is my favorite, along with the rest of the Bufftown Bullies.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I actually met lots of and talked to lots of really cool people. Just had a great time all around. I went, shout out Small from the Frog server who came up to, crashed, and then we drove down to Buffalo, participated in the tournament. Both made. Small, I think, had the best record going into top 16.
Nice.
I had, I think he went undefeated in Swiss, but that's also like 3 draws. I, on the other hand, went like draw, lose, win. And I made top 16.
I'm assuming that was a bit of a butt clencher before you knew how the pairing.
Oh, yeah. I was like, there's no way I'm getting it. And then someone else was like, I did the math. I think you made it. I was like, no, I didn't. I did not. No.
What's the tournament equivalent of D's get degrees?
Yeah. Truly. The power. Never underestimate the power of a draw. So I played Riel. Small played Thras Bruce. And then we saw each other in top 16. Also, in our top 16 pod were 2 other people who came as a group. I think from Syracuse. I think it's Syracuse. Anyway, they were all there. A bunch of them were financial consultants, and apparently they all play cEDH and Magic at their job, which is kind of funny. They've got like a league running and whatever. Anyway, one of the guy who was playing Thrasios Timna went on to win the whole thing, which the prize for which was a tropical island, and then everyone who made finals got a savannah. So a pretty sweet prize, and I actually like beating myself up a bit because the turn before that dude won, I had win in hand, but I just didn't think I could, like, I didn't have enough counter magic for me to be like, yeah, I got this. I was like, I'll chance it, and then lost on
and it was like definitely enough counter magic for you to have gone for it.
Yeah, well, it's like I had one piece of protection, and I was like, there's no way. There's like Thras Bruce, Thras Timna, Najila. There's no way. Also, that game, truly incredible. So I resolved a From the Ashes, right? So let me restate the pot again. I'm playing Riel, Thras Bruce, Thras Timna, Najila. Okay? How many basics do you think my opponents would normally find? Collectively.
Yeah.
Like
0,
maybe
right?
one.
Maybe one from the Thras Bruce player playing a forest.
The Thras Timna player was like, From the Ashes, great. Proceeds to find 4 basics for his deck.
Get wrecked.
Absolutely wrecked.
This is fully karma. This is 100% karma.
It was wild. But no, it was a lot of fun. Lots of great games, great people, and I look forward to doing another one.
And hopefully continue the streak next time. Well, I guess restart the streak of bullying the Americans.
Yeah.
You still let us down on that one, I'm gonna be real.
I should have just jammed the win.
Yeah.
Always
All right,
go for it.
We'll be back next time. Buff Down Bullies. Our nemesis. Except not nemesis.
Yeah.
The nemesis. The Nema homies. Nemesis homies.
Yeah.
Stop.
Frenemies.
It's not getting better.
Just because of that, no, never mind. Yeah. Aside from that,
so Reed, what'd you get up to that weekend?
Well, sorry, before that weekend, me and Morgan wanted to go get into 2v2 again, because 2v2 is starting back up in Toronto.
Oh yeah,
which is hot, which is a super great time. So it's like a bit outside of the city, or a bit outside of the city center. So you had to get up pretty early and do some driving around to get up there, which is fun and everything. And was totally worth it, except it wasn't, because we showed up and it went like half an hour past the start time and the store still wasn't open, and they sent an email out like half an hour after the open and be like, actually we're canceling, you get free entry next month. So yeah, that was fun.
Drove a big circle all around the city.
Yeah.
And then went to the normal local meetup.
The normal
that's
cEDH meetup.
That's like literally a 15-minute drive
yeah,
from my house.
It's like half an hour from me.
After
it's
3
like,
hours of driving.
Yeah.
Tragic.
Right.
Are they still doing? Are they going to do another 2v2?
Yeah, like they're doing.
I sure
it,
hope so. Allegedly,
this
there's one in
month,
August, but I don't actually know when it is.
We'll see, but definitely. I mean, but the decks are still together. I don't think either of us have P-stars apart yet, so we'll see. But yeah, so that the weekend that Lyndon was down in Buffalo playing games, I instead went to go see the Angels at Blue Jays game on
I wish I
that
saw
Friday,
that game. Fuck.
which was so worth it, because the only reason I went was to watch Shohei Ohtani play, and I mean also to get some hot dogs.
Showtime, baby.
Showtime, baby, and also get some hot dogs and ballpark peanuts and pretzels and shit. Just great.
Only cost you
Ballpark food.
$50 Canadian.
Oh yeah, like God. The actually the hot dogs are like surprisingly good value, as long as you get like the non-gimmick, just like generic stadium ones that are tiny, but they only cost like $2.50 a piece. They're great.
Oh wow, that's good.
But yeah, beer costs way too much. Anyway, so yeah, only reason I went to that game was to see Shohei Ohtani play. And then I got to see Shohei Ohtani play all right, because first inning, he's second in the batting order, walks up to the base, homers on the first pitch he sees.
Wow.
Just I almost missed it, and I didn't, and I'm so happy that I got to witness it. So I've achieved my getting to see Shohei Ohtani play in like one of potentially the best seasons of.
You could have just made me feel better by saying it sucked. You know?
No, it was fantastic. It was like absolutely great. The light was fantastic. The dome was open. It was a bit of a sweaty day normally, but I think they had the AC running for like a while before the game started with the dome.
Okay, I was like, they had the AC
terrible.
running with an open dome.
No, not with the open dome. But I think they had it.
They're just cooling the planet. They're combating global warming.
Yeah. Something thermodynamics.
Fun time. Lyndon definitely totally could have come, and I gave him like multiple warnings of advance warning that the seats were going to sell out, and then seats sold out.
Yeah, and then I didn't want to pay like $250 for a ticket. I should have just jumped on it sooner. Hopefully I'll catch him next year, and hopefully he doesn't fall off. You know,
yeah, just
gets absolutely
injured for
out.
the next 2 years, and you never get to see him play again.
Oh, God. Yeah. Well, that's cool. And then we've got some other things on new developments. We've got at the end of the month, there's a tournament in Kingston going on that I think we're all going to try and make it to, as well as many, many friends of the show from the good old Queens Magic the Gathering Club. We'll be trying to be there. So.
Oh yeah. I think there's a link up already for registration, so I'll throw that one in the description if I remember to, and if not, you can yell at me on Discord, and there's like a 50-50 chance that I'll put it in after the fact.
Honestly, just yell at Reed on Discord either way. It's the safe call.
I need the engagement. I thrive on the attention.
If I don't get a notification like every hour, I just my self-esteem crumbles.
Yeah.
He's not real. He's just the thing on the other side of your screen. He only exists as long as you believe in him.
And lastly, in new developments, Morgan, Reed, when do you guys want to get this?
I guess I guess this one's me. I'm going to MagicCon Vegas, as is a longtime friend of the show, Pongo from Team Turn 3, who I don't think has made it out to too many cEDH events in recent years, so that'll be cool. And some of the people from the Mind Sculptors making it out. It's gonna be a whole thing. So if you're in the area or can get to Vegas with 6 weeks notice, then you should definitely check that out.
You gonna play the slots?
What's a blackjack at least?
I'll put $5 in a slot machine.
Dude, do it. Win $100. Win $1,000.
Are you just gonna play quarter?
Just play roulette. Put it all on black and keep doubling your money, dude. Infinite money trick.
Just martingale, right? If you lose, you double the bet. And
you double the bet. That is actually how I play roulette. It's fun. You start with a low amount. You can play for a while.
Until you bet all of your money and lose.
Yeah, but what are the odds of that happening, man?
Well, just
every time it depends on how much money you have.
Yeah. Simply take out another mortgage. Beg all of sell a kidney, do whatever you have to. God. But last thing you should do is sell your magic cards. That's.
It goes first kidney, magic cards, second kidney.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. That wraps up new developments. Housekeeping, we have no new patrons, but as always, thank you to our existing patrons who help keep I was going to say lights on, but I mean, it's just the mics on, I guess.
Well, I feel like we can maybe tease that there is some more gameplay footage in the pipeline with progress being made on it. So, hopefully we can get that to you soon. Because
there are lights there that we spend.
There are lights there. There are a lot of lights. We have some very nice lights.
Yeah. Cool. So on to the main topic, which is pressure. So, what is pressure in cEDH or Magic in general? In fact, actually, I feel like there was a great article on pressure, maybe one of the most iconic Magic articles of all time, about who is the beatdown.
Trick question. We're all the beatdown.
No, trick question. The real beatdown was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so which one of you is gonna take a stab at defining it? Read.
Yeah, I mean, so pressure just in Magic in general, and this is just the general context of it. Actually, I should probably have pulled up a Merriam-Webster dictionary definition for pressure or something. But anyway, pressure in the Magic sense, for the most part, is just the means by which you compel your opponent to take game actions. And typically in 1v1, that means taking game actions that they wouldn't normally have to take, or doing things ahead of when they would want to do them, or pressuring them to have something or have to do something by a certain time, basically putting deadlines on game actions. In cEDH is a bit weirder because you're not in 1v1, everything you're trying to do is with the end goal of killing your single other opponent, whereas in cEDH it's a bit weirder. Obviously, theoretically everything that you're doing is propelling you toward ending the game and you winning the game, but that can take a lot of different routes and can fully depend on what the rest of the people are doing. So pressure is really just the means by which you force other players to take actions, and typically take actions with either suboptimal pieces for their own win percentage, or at suboptimal times for their own win percentage.
I think there's another aspect of pressure that is kind of interesting, which is that there are obviously different types of pressure, which we'll get into. There's combat damage and cards and stacks and all of this stuff. And each of these can operate kind of independently, right? So you could be winning the race in terms of card advantage, but someone else is just absolutely crushing it in terms of combat damage against you, and that they're let's say it's a race to 10 on each of these different pressure scales. You're at a 5, everyone else is at a 2 on card advantage, but someone else is at a 9 on combat. They're the one who's going to be in the control seat of the game. So even if your deck is maybe not well suited to one of the other types of pressure, so long as you're dominating and controlling that one aspect, you're in the driver's seat. So it's important to consider not just any one aspect, but all aspects of pressure, and some of them are definitely more underutilized than others. I think combat probably the most underutilized,
which is wild because it's also like the sort of like the
freest
main thing that you would think of when. Well, no, it's like the main thing that you would think of when you think of like applying pressure. In like a Magic sense in general, is just like attacking people and doing damage to them. But
yeah,
as we all know, cEDH players don't know how combat works, so
you got to get in all of your free swings early.
Mechanics.
I may or may not have I may or not have forgotten how First Strike works multiple times in the course of playing cEDH games.
Actually, I think I forgot how First Strike worked. Oh yeah, no. The other day when playing Magar, I forgot that it would be separate phases.
Yeah.
That my mana wouldn't persist between. Yeah. Study up on combat.
So
okay.
We have a couple of different types of like how you exert pressure, but before then, there's sort of like we have it written down here as like types of pressure, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's really types of pressure necessarily. It's sort of like the
pressure dynamics.
It's dynamics or the context in which pressures are applied, pressure is applied. Which is mostly, I think we boiled it down to, and this should work, I think, for the most part, like in general, of like, it's mostly about how many players are allied and on what axis they're allied on. So the 3 that we have written down here, and we'll like give examples and walk into these a bit more, but the 3 that we have written down here are 1 versus 3 pressures. So this would be like archenemy pressure. Or like, like the archenemy exerting pressure on the rest of the table. 3v1 pressure, which is like the gang up pressure, so 3 people exerting pressure on 1 person at the table.
Or basically, it can even just be 1 person exerting pressure, like through combat. Like let's say one person's got a big flyer or Crom, or someone's almost dead. They're continuously getting attacked, and it's like the other 2 are basically bystanders, and they're going to do you no favors.
Yeah, they actively either benefit or are completely neutral on the pressure being applied to that 1 person.
Yeah.
And then there's sort of weirder, and we'll talk about this one a bit more when we get to it, is a 2v1v1 pressure. So a lot of the time this is, like 2 people applying pressure to the rest of the table, but the other 2 people aren't necessarily allied in resisting that pressure, or like aren't aligned on how they're dealing with that pressure at all. So like 1v3 pressure, to go back to the top and to sort of get into these a bit more, 1v3 pressure is probably the easiest to understand out of all of these, which is, hey, I'm going to try to win.
Well, not even necessarily. It can just like also be, I've assembled some kind of engine or whatever that's put me so far ahead, and it's going to win me the game the longer if things continue on as
basically,
is.
I am the threat, deal with me.
Thrasio, Seedborn Muse, classic example.
Nowadays, I guess the more topical one would be like resolving a Tivit or resolving a One Ring or something. Yeah. Something like that. Where okay, we're not dead yet, but this is like this is applying pressure to us. This is forcing action out of the rest of the table because it's going to be really bad if this like continues to persist for any longer. And then
2v1v1 is when 2 people have that going on.
Well,
and
let's do
they're dueling each other, and then the 2 stragglers are banding together to try and stop either of them from winning.
Sort of, yeah. It's mostly like I guess I sort of explained it in the opposite of what it should have been. When I or like it might have been a bit ambiguous. Yeah. So like, sorry, the 2v1v1 pressure is like, yeah, it's like the two in the 2v1v1 are actually the people like, sorry, are the people like having pressure applied to them, but it's sort of as a byproduct of two other people at the table fighting. If that makes sense. Where, yeah, like two people are trying to like put themselves like way far ahead, and the other two people aren't going to be able to catch up and realize that they need the help of another person to like keep the rest of the table contained and at least like keep the game going rather than just losing and like letting one person take over.
And what's interesting about these dynamics, as they relate to the other like the actual true types of pressure, not just the pressure dynamics, is that the weakest position, like if you had to rank the positions in terms of like how likely you are to make it out of it, if you're not the one who's applying the pressure, you're the one who's the pressure being applied against. How would you rank order these pressure dynamics? Because I would say 3v1 is the most likely to survive. Second would be 2v1v1, and then last would be 1v3. Right?
If you're applying the pressure?
No, if the pressure is being applied to you.
I'd say 1v3 is like you're very likely to make it out of that alive because you have two other people that are like also looking to get.
No, okay, it was okay. I think we're just we're saying the same thing, but we just mixed up the 1v3 versus 3v1.
Okay,
who's who?
Okay.
But yeah, basically, I'm saying the least likely of you to make it out of it is the one where it's you getting like attacked with combat and two other people who are there actively rooting for you to die or just are indifferent. And that's a scenario that basically usually will only present itself through combat damage. So kind of fascinating to look at how combat damage can be so impactful and very difficult to get out of, and yet I think it's very seldom a consideration in cEDH deck building, optimizing for combat. I mean, obviously there's still some stuff like Ishai, Jessica, or whatever, but not too often.
Well, I think it is also just because, like, sure, when combat damage manifests itself as a threat, it's like a really big problem and a really big threat. But like, it's still oftentimes it just is too slow to be relevant. Like,
yeah.
Often when we're talking about pressure, we're sort of already applying a bit of a filter that we're talking about games that are on the longest side, or like towards the longer end of the spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, like, attempting wins and like visibly setting up for wins is pressure, but it's like it's less the context of like pressure doesn't really exist, or like it doesn't, like, pressure is like less.
Wait, then the show is over.
Concept, like earlier
in
the game,
pressure doesn't
right?
exist.
Well, like no, like it's just like less relevant as a concept earlier in the game, where it's just like, okay, like we're just early in the game, it's more of a scramble. Where it's just
certainly, but I mean, also you do consider.
Oh, sure. You consider
the possibility of late game, like,
yeah.
for instance, with Najila, right? Decks that can snowball or Winota. You're very cognizant of late game pressure, and so you try and you know, nip that in the bud early.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, early win attempts are like early, like, you could call it win pressure, but it's less pressure and more just like, okay, here's a problem that we're just gonna like die to immediately if it doesn't get solved, versus like, all right, we need to like evaluate some threats here and like for the next like 2 or 3 turns and like make sure that like that doesn't get too out of hand, which is like the kind of pressure that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now that we've spent all this time on pressure dynamics, let's actually get into the nitty gritty of how to exert pressure and the types of pressure. So, first of all, combat damage, and you know, as I was saying, people don't typically build around it. Morgan gave some pretty good reasons why. Let's delve into this one a bit more.
Yeah. So we still haven't really, like, combat damage it feels like it's become more of a thing. There was like sort of this like this like low end of combat damage a couple of years ago, a few years ago at this point, like during I don't like 2018, 19, 2020, and then like a couple of years before then as well, I guess. Of like combat damage didn't really matter because people could just like win and deal with combat damage pretty easily, and there wasn't like a whole lot of like great combat steroids, especially in the command zone. We're sort of like back into a point now where like combat damage is definitely more relevant, so like this is certainly something you should be thinking of a bit more, because there are some pretty powerful combat steroids that have been printed over the last few years. And it's pretty like, it just turns out that a lot of good commanders also tend to be like pretty large bodies, which is, you know, pretty good at applying pressure as well in terms
They've
of
also
combat.
printed a bunch of stuff that actually cares about combat damage. I mean, we
like,
kind of joked that Timna, you know, when that first came out, that was the thing that actually made us have to care about combat. And then every time, you know, Timna kind of, you know, if it waxes or wanes in pop, every time it's back, it's like, we have to care about combat again. But they print a lot of stuff recently, like, I guess I don't know how recently counts as recently, but in cEDH, I think it can be like, you know, on the order of a couple years. But Professional Facebreaker and Grim Hireling, you know, I think have been two recent-ish additions that...
There's just like a bunch of
Grim
engines
Hireling
and
printed
things.
like 4 years
Yeah, it
ago.
was printed, like,
No.
it was printed very long ago.
No way. I'm going to look this up. You guys carry on.
Wasn't it printed like in Battle Bond or something?
No,
I
it's
guess
like
it was after
AFR.
Battle Bond, which was a while ago.
It's like a year and a half.
Oh, it was in one of the for some reason I always associated with Eldraine, but yeah, it was in the AFR commander deck. I'm
Right.
pretty sure.
Which when were those?
I believe 2 years ago now.
Yeah, okay. I was right. Don't try and gaslight me.
All right. But yeah, so like there's just like a lot of stuff stapled to wanting to go through combat now. Value engines, win cons, etc. Commanders that like want to connect for value or want to get into the red zone for value, where like that was definitely like less of a thing before. So it's definitely more relevant to talk about now. And yeah, I mean, so combat damage, obviously, the reason it's pressure is because you don't want to die to somebody hitting you in the face. So if you're at like, you know, 10 and somebody's got 5 damage on board, that means you have a 2-turn clock versus that person, which means that, you know, you have to do something about that. You can't just like sit there and continue getting hit as much as you would like to just like be passive and not have to deal with threats and spend your energy elsewhere. So it is pressure. And you should be thinking about that when you're in game, both from the side of being pressured and from the side of applying pressure. Obviously, from the side of being pressured, it's a pretty easy evaluation. It's, am I about to die? Am I about to die in the next 3 turns, etc.? If so, how am I going to die? Can I deal with that threat effectively, like, given these duels? If not, do I have to, like, alter my game plan at all? Do I have to care about this threat? On the other side, applying combat damage pressure, which is what Lyndon was talking about earlier, is a bit more involved in terms of threat assessment and evaluation and sort of like thinking about how much you want to commit to both, like, you know, putting damage on the board, so putting creatures and power on the board, which, you know, you might be like overextending or like spending resources to put things on the board that you would normally be spending, you know, working toward a win or working toward improving your value engines and stuff. And a lot of that has to do with how close somebody is to dying, how much of a threat they are, and how much they're going to have to alter their game plan to deal with your, like, you dealing combat damage to them. As well as, you know, the clock of you dealing combat damage and how much of a, like, a game plan diversion it is from, like, your normal game plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best kind of combat damage pressure comes from decks that apply it naturally, where it's doing something. Yeah. It usually comes from your commander, or you're doing something you already want to be doing.
Or, yeah, your main game plan, it already involves combat, so stuff like, you know, Najeela, Winota, Tivit, or just
Tivit,
like,
yeah,
or just
you're already turning sideways, or
just like large commanders that you're casting anyway, so something like Atraxa, where like
Atraxa's a good one. Yeah,
you're not playing Atraxa in the command zone because it gets into the red zone, and it doesn't, like, getting into the red zone isn't part of its strategy. Like, it's not like Tivit where it has to attack. It has already gotten its stuff, but you want to cast it, and it also happens to be a 7/7 flyer with vigilance, right? So,
and lifelink.
Yep. and damage for reasons.
Yeah, it is very annoying to deal with.
No
the best way to deal with
trample.
it is to have your own Atraxa through Phantasmal Image or Gilded Drake.
That's not true. The best way to deal with it is to leave it in play and just keep copying it.
Yeah,
You don't even Gilded Drake it. You just make copies of it.
did that a couple times at played against an Atraxa player at Bufftown, and definitely stole Atraxa and copied Atraxa. So
There might be a reason why I'm putting Apple Spawn in some mid-range green decks.
Cool. So yeah, best combat.
Well, so that's combat damage, but there's also like another layer to this though.
Okay.
Which is not just the actual act of you dealing combat damage to somebody and then them realizing that they're going to be dead in a couple of turns, or like you get one hit and they're like, okay, I now have to do the math on like how long this clock is of me getting hit in the face. You don't actually have to deal combat damage to apply pressure. You can also just apply the threat of combat damage, which is a much more powerful tool than I think a lot of people would assume.
I think it's also just a more powerful tool than killing someone. I'd rather get deals and like, hey,
yeah, thanks.
I'd rather hey, I won't attack you if if you remove this, or if you don't attack me or whatever. Lots of like real advantage to be gained from that.
And this can again be either implied or explicit. So the explicit threat of combat damage is you saying to somebody, I'm gonna hit you in the face unless you do X thing, or unless you agree to X, or unless like whatever. The implicit threat of combat damage is say you have you're playing Urza and you cast Urza a couple of times this game because it's been killed, and you just like have a couple of you have a few 13/13 constructs lying around. Even if you're not attacking people, they definitely have to do the math on, okay, if he does ever decide to attack me with those constructs, what do I have to do about that? Do I have to take that into account? Do I have to engage with like making deals with that person, or like trying to pry apart their decision making so that I can figure out my game plan? So just having a large board and threatening violence can be as effective as actually committing violence, is what I'm getting at.
100%. Morgan, anything to
add? No, I think you guys summed it up pretty well. I think I do have more to say about the talking aspects and the threats of violence and things, but we have sections that those are applicable to farther down, so I'll save it for them.
Cool. Which brings us to the next type of pressure, which is approaching an inevitability state, which is kind of like a weird categorization here, but it's kind of encompassing not only like card advantage engines, but also full control over the game through stacks, possibly, right? Where it's like with a card advantage, if you've got a really strong card advantage engine, it's like this person's getting closer and closer to winning the game, and therefore I'm going to lose. Whereas with like a fully stacked out board, they might not be actually closer to winning the game, but everyone else has basically achieved a state where it's impossible for them to win, right? So you're going to win eventually, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, inevitability. Morgan, your turn. You talk about some of this.
Sure. So, I mean, when we talk about game states and this sort of advantage building up, people will obviously quickly go to like engines, right? And these, really we've seen a bunch of cards that absolutely shape the course of the game. Obviously, like Ristic Study has been huge for a while. Recently we got the One Ring, and they just tend to snowball, especially if you can get them out early. And you hit a certain point. There is a certain point that people hit, and it varies a bit deck by deck, of having just enough cards in hand that you're basically just dead, and unless everyone's working really hard, there's not a lot you can do about it. And yeah, when you see that state sort of building up, you definitely need to be thinking about how to do something about it before it hits that point of criticality where they just have the answer for absolutely everything.
Reed?
Yes, I want Fowl's chicken.
Yeah, how long are we gonna go?
That's gonna cut out.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I mean, the idea here is realistically just like, sort of abstracting it away from like just cards as well. Like obviously, like a lot of decks can like accrue a large number of cards and win the game, but also like you can just accrue like resources in other ways. You can like have a couple of things on board and just accrue things on them or like abilities to use them or whatever, which also factors into this a lot. This is stuff like having a Yison with a bunch of counters on it is like pretty scary. Stuff like having if you're playing like some mana sink commander that doesn't necessarily produce cards but produces advantage in other ways, like something like Rocco. This could also be a thing where it's like, once people start producing resources in general that put them toward that kind of advantage, where like the table's just not going to be able to deal with them, that is also part of an inevitability state. This can also weirdly like encompass like parts of combat damage, where like some decks just like have ways of dealing damage to the table at once. So like if you're getting everybody to relatively low life, there are decks out there. I like Odd Nixilis. There are a couple of decks that play stuff like Delayed Blast Fireball, or just like mass damage effects in general that can also just be
Thrastago rocks, baby.
File Smasher, Thrastago, like that kind of stuff where it's just like, oh, they just like have incidental damage tacked on. So like it's like there's an inevitability there. Like you might not be taking a lot of combat damage every turn, but the longer the game goes on, typically people's life totals go down the longer games go on, unless they're playing something like Atraxa, and for some reason Atraxa is sticking around for forever, or like people are just like letting themselves get hit by Bruce attacks or whatever. People tend to like lose life as the game goes on, so once everybody's at like sub 20, suddenly there's some types of decks with inevitability versus like low life totals, even if they're not particularly great at dealing combat damage specifically.
Also, we didn't write this down, but I kind of feel like there's one, and I feel like there's fall under inevitability, but it's neither a card advantage engine nor a full stacked out board. I think it falls sort of under the control aspect. So you can kind of have full control over the game through just sheer overwhelming like interaction. And so like this comes up sometimes in Riel,
which also
where you've got lots of card advantage, but that feel like it's the card advantage is backed up by interaction, so no one else can win, and then your wins are basically like impossible to stop. You can sort of achieve a mini microcosm of this with Abolisher and Ranger Captain, where they're merely being in play exert a lot of pressure on the game, if they stick around, right? So if you just play it and then it wins, it's not really pressure. But if you play an Abolisher, like people start and pass, people will sweat, right? Because it is representing a complete shift in, everyone's interaction doesn't do anything anymore, or the stack interaction.
Yeah. So I would just say like rattlesnakes in general will probably apply pressure, right? Like I know Grand Abolisher isn't necessarily a rattlesnake, but like just those types of effects in general, like also just apply pressure, even if they're not like actively, impacting the game. Like they're not a stacks piece that's actually stopping people from doing stuff. Just the threat of it being there, similar to the threat of combat damage or the threat of somebody producing a lot of cards or mana very quickly, can like be pressure in its own right.
I mean, I do think there's a difference there in that, like, I don't know that, like, the rattlesnakes don't produce pressure inherently, like, it's only the certain rattlesnakes that were, like, obviously, Ranger Captain is, like, sort of the number one rattlesnake card that people think about, and obviously that one applies pressure because it works both ways, but, like, I don't think something like an Aether Spell Bomb applies pressure.
Sure, yeah, sure, fair.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Although a Judge's Familiar does play.
I don't know about that.
Not copium. What?
Yeah. Cool. And then, was there anything else? I mean, I think I've said my piece on inevitability states. Do you guys, anything else here that you want to talk about, or?
Well, I mean, so I did want to talk about like mana disparity a bit, or like it's so a lot of this is like less about like a lot of like inevitability states. They can be just like raw objective like card advantage and mana advantage, or like just game state advantage in a vacuum, like completely irrespective of the rest of the table. But I would say I would say like a vast majority of the time it's going to be actually like a disparity between resources that produces like pressure from inevitability states, or like a very high amount of objective pressure, like plus something that the table just like isn't equipped to deal with at all. So like some engine that like just people actually can't stop once it gets rolling, so that they have to respect. But a lot of the time, the pressure is produced from there being a disparity between people's game states, where like if everybody like has
pressure in real life, like
if every turns out,
if pressure is all the same everywhere, you know,
turns out words have meanings and there's a reason to use them. Yeah, but like if everybody, it turns out like if everybody at the table has a Ristic study and everybody's feeding everybody's Ristic studies, there's a lot less like pressure that everybody at the table feels. I mean, the game very quickly feels like it's teetering on a knife's edge because anybody can win it at any time, but it's not really pressure. It's more just like, oh, this is just like a very volatile game now. Like I'm not being pressured to take game actions aside from what I would normally be doing. I just like, it's just like everything is very volatile and very touchy now. Whereas like if one person has a Ristic study and is drawing a lot of cards and nobody else is drawing a lot of cards, like that's pressure. Like that's very definitively pressure, because it's like, okay, like we need to deal with this person who has a lot more resources than the rest of the table, because they are going to be doing something busted soon, and we know that. So it's same thing with mana disparity, which is the thing that I actually wanted to talk about here, which is I would say mana disparity is like a very real form of pressure, but just a lot of like very, very often, in order to actually convert that pressure, like it has to be paired with something else to actually like consume the mana or like meaningfully utilize it. Obviously, a deck full of 60 lands is not going to be a deck that does anything, so you need things to do with that mana. It's sort of like more of a prerequisite, but basically, like if you have infinite mana, it erases the prerequisite for doing busted things. So as soon as you have a busted thing to do, you can do it much more easily. So it's just like anything, like if like a mana disparity on its own might not be threatening if like, you know, there's a Drannith Magistrate in play and people just like, the person who has a lot of mana, has no cards in hand, is drawing one card a turn, doesn't have access to the commander, can't do anything on their board or whatever. That's not very threatening. But say their deck is just absolutely packed full of threats that like if they rip one of those off of the top, it's just like going to end the game with a spot or put them like into a very advantaged position. That becomes pressure, even though like there's nothing inherently bad about them just like having no cards in hand and having a ton of mana. But it's the same thing with like, you know, having a commander that efficiently or like even just consumes mana at all for some amount of large advantage, or if they have pre-existing card advantage resources, so they have a full hand and now they have a ton of mana, that's a threat. That's a really threatening thing. If they have a mana sink in play, even if it doesn't produce cards, right? If they have like a Yisan in play, or if they just like have something that requires a lot of mana to activate in play, but now they have the mana to activate it, that's a big thing. Or even like a deck having a lot of high like card velocity, where a lot of cards, like a very large number of cards in the deck, allow them to see more cards from the deck. That also becomes like very dangerous if they have enough mana to effectively utilize those, right? So just to contextualize mana disparity as a form of pressure, because there were pre-show arguments about this, and I do think it's, you know, it's more nuanced than, I think it's pretty easy to understand. Combat damage is a form of pressure, card advantage is a form of pressure, full like board control is a form of pressure. Mana sort of like there's like a couple of asterisks on it, but it's definitely like you should be considering how much mana somebody is producing, obviously, as a threat, and if them producing a lot of mana might mean that you need to take game actions to deal with that.
It's definitely a force multiplier.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
like whatever they
definitely.
have going on, if they have way more mana, like the second they have anything remotely threatening, if they have way more mana, then it's gonna be a problem that you probably have to deal with.
Yes.
Mana lets you do things, and if you have things to do with that mana, then that's pretty scary.
Yep.
Honestly, really, the problem is just things in Magic are just sort of broken, right? Like that's
Yeah.
Objects.
Ban things, ban cards. Okay. I think that wraps up the types of pressure, which just leaves how do you deal with it. And
that's the neat part.
It's kind of, I don't know. I think by virtue of like if you're in a situation where you're being pressured, I think you're kind of already like you don't get to that state willingly, right? Like you've probably already you're probably not necessarily equipped to get out of it. But there are some things you can do to try and, increase your odds.
Well,
I think
I'm not sure that's necessarily true. Just because
I think
pressure is like it's incentivizing action that you wouldn't normally be taking. So it doesn't mean that like you can't get out of the pressure. It just means that it's taking your attention and resources away from like your main game plan or what you want to be doing. Because I don't want
fair. With combat that's totally I mostly had Seedborn Muse Thrasius in my head, and I was like, no one willingly lets themselves get.
Like I might have like 3 tutors in hand that I could be using to go get like more pieces to put myself further ahead, or go get them to get like stack interaction and then like a win or whatever. But if I'm getting beat in the face by a 12/12 in the air, like I'm probably gonna have to burn one of those on a Swords to Plowshares, which isn't something that I want to do, but I'm gonna like have to do it. But it also doesn't mean that I'm not well equipped to continue playing the game with the other 2 tutors.
No, that's totally fair. That's totally fair. But yeah, so I was going to segue that into the number one thing you should do is work as a team, if you can. If you're not being teamed up against everyone else due to combat or whatever, but if one person has, or is beginning to build pressure, and you gotta stop it before it becomes overwhelming, because the nature of these kind of pressure scenarios is that they tend to build and build and build. Maybe combat not so much. Combat's more like a slow continuous chip, but like the advantage engines, over time it gets harder and harder to deal with it because they draw more and more answers. So work as a team. Talk with with the other people in the pod. Say, hey, sure, you don't want this Muse Thrasius or this Rhystic study or whatever it is in play just as much as me. Let's talk. Let's talk. How do we address this? What do you got? What do I got? I've got a removal spell, but no way to back it up. You've got some. Can you back me up? Cool. Maybe we can get this thing done. So talk.
Yeah, I think there's like a few different ways that you can use the talking, because like you can also like you can potentially try and talk people into racing. Like if someone has, like, certainly a conversation I've had many times is like, that a few people at the table have like a decent amount of combat damage, like maybe collectively 3 people have somewhere on the order of like 12 damage a turn cycle that they can probably get in relatively easily with, and someone's pulling way ahead on cards. You can talk to people like, hey, we should probably go with this person because like their One Ring or their Rhystic study or whatever is going to bury us if we let them play this game for 5 more turns, we're going to lose. So let's see if we can make that 3 turns. And you can also work with people particularly protecting things that mitigate their advantage. Like, it's great to have 1,000 cards in hand, but if there's a rule of law, you're pretty limited on how you can use them. So that's definitely, an opportunity where, let's say you have a rule of law and the person who's way ahead on cards goes to remove it. You can try and appeal to the table to protect it. Like, hey, maybe you don't love this rule of law being in play, it's annoying for your deck or whatever, but like, we're gonna die to the person with 12 cards in hand if this rule of law goes away. And so you can just look for, like, basically any advantage that the table has against the person who's ahead, and then try and work politically to, like, turn the game into being about that and leverage that advantage as much as possible.
Yeah. I will say, I think you touched on it a bit, but also I think something to be said here is also just winning yourself with just like as a concept without like any other packaging around it is like a huge one. Just, you know, sometimes you have to actually evaluate like if the pressure actually matters at all, and sometimes it might matter, but like you're being forced to go for a win earlier than you would have wanted to, but it might still just be a good win attempt anyway, and you should probably be able to recognize that, or just like think about that in the context of being pressured, where it's just like, yeah, sometimes this pressure is actually fake and only matters if I wasn't winning here, which I'm not. I am winning, so die.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, a trap I certainly fall into sometimes, is wanting my wins to be near sure things.
Yep.
When
This is like definitely an extension.
This happened to me at Bufftown Bullies last time, where it's like I had the win attempt and I didn't go for it because I was like, I only have one piece of protection. Surely, you know, there's enough interaction in the pod to stop this. Anyway, didn't go for it. Lost before I got another turn. You know, sad. But I could have maybe assessed like there's a 60% chance of success. You know, which I mean is better than the initial 25 you walk in with, but you know, maybe you think you can get better, but maybe you can't. You gotta try and accurately assess what the your percentages are, and don't be afraid to take them, even if it's not a sure thing. Yeah.
Yep. I do think one thing that isn't, I guess, technically under this heading, but is important to point out. Just it was, you know, I was reminded of it when we talked about making the win attempt. Is people react to pressure in a lot of ways, and one of them is trying to make a win attempt.
True.
Which, if you are not exactly sure, you know, what's going on or how that is going to look, you can, I mean, basically, people panic, right? Like, you start beating them down with a big flyer. Like, you hit someone, I don't know, 2 or 3 times. You hit someone 2 times with a Tivit, they're gonna do something, right? And
you better be prepared for what they're gonna do.
You better be prepared for what they're gonna do, because, like, for example, let's say they're the person directly after you in turn order. So they go like, okay, I can't deal with the Tivit. It has ward 1 billion, basically hexproof. I don't understand how I'm supposed to deal with this. I don't have a good way of putting out flying blockers, so I guess my out is to win. And then they go for it, and you're like, cool, yeah, well, I have the stuff to stop you. But then you've spent some resources, and then the person after them goes, well, maybe I'll try a win now that some resources have been spent stopping this first person. And so, you know, often a win attempt in a turn cycle gives the signal for other people to make their win attempts. So when you are applying pressure, make sure you're confident you can handle that potential cascading effect. And that also means, specifically with combat damage pressure, you might actually want to be factoring in the relative turn order of the people you're killing.
Yeah.
Because it's always safest. It's safest if the person immediately before you panics.
Yes, and if the rest of the table / you, I guess, like, are prepared for that eventuality. But yeah, having the person directly after you panicking is not a good place to be, just in general, in the format. Even outside of the context of pressure. If the person immediately after you is panicking and trying to do things, it's probably not a good look for your chances.
You want the game to proceed in a controlled manner where you're the one in the driver's seat, and that is difficult to do when people act unpredictably, and it gets harder and harder to predict what people are going to do when you kind of force their hand. So yeah,
Which
just
is
be
also
cautious about it.
that's also a reason why talking to people / talking at people / listening to them is really OP, because it means that it suddenly becomes not as unpredictable, and you can gain a lot of information from, again, just engaging in table talk and sort of talking about people's positions and stuff, even if it's not
100%.
actively trying to draw information out of them. You get a better idea of where people are at and where they're what they're thinking of doing, or sort of what the vibe is, and then you can sort of figure out, like, okay, if I do continue attacking this person, they might make a very ill-advised word attempt, and that might not be great for me. So maybe I have to either like talk with them about it and like figure out a deal, or like figure out something to do about that, or just like lay off a bit and like take a couple of turns and hit somebody else, or get somebody else dead first.
Also, from the opposite perspective, sometimes, you know, it is sometimes to your advantage to make yourself and your intentions known, so that you are more predictable and more of a known quantity to your opponents, because sometimes it might be like, you know, oh, I'm going to counter your demonic tutor, and you're like, no, I swear to God, I'm only getting like this thing or whatever tutor it is. Like that, you can oftentimes, people don't like burning counterspells, right? If you're casting a Neoform stacking a dork, and someone's like, this is Grand Abolisher, or I have to at least respect the Grand Abolisher and to win attempt, I need to counter this. And you're like, no, listen, I'm just getting a Collector Oof, I swear, and it's going to be because, you know, our mutual enemy over there is doing absolutely insane stuff with Dockside or whatever. So yeah, sometimes it is useful to declare your intentions. Okay, is that it for our main topic?
Well, I know Morgan wanted to talk a bit about politics, and I'm not sure if you covered everything that you wanted to cover for this stuff.
I think I mostly covered that, or covered the stuff I wanted to say, but I guess I didn't talk so much about like directly interacting with the person who's applying pressure to you specifically. I guess we sort of touched on, you know, talking through your intentions and saying like, hey, if you keep swinging that at me, I have to kill it, or like, here, I see this as a problem, what can we do?
We're abandoning old dignity and just like pleading, just begging hopelessly.
I see you played games with me before.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I've definitely like done a few times is sort of been political with whatever pieces I have in play, either giving them something that they want. Like, often people will try and kill you. Like, let's say you play a Draneth Magistrate and they don't have their commander out. People will be like, well, I want that Draneth Magistrate gone, so, you know, activate player removal. And you could be like, all right, well, how about this? I'll just block with the Draneth. Like, then you don't have to hit me anymore. You can hit someone else. You get your commander. I'm not thrilled about that, but I'm still in the game. Or, conversely, you can threaten to block with something they don't want gone. Like, let's say they're playing a relatively stacksy creature-based deck and they're beating you down, saying like, hey, I'm going to block with this Collector if you swing at me again, because I'm taking too much damage, you know, can be a bit of a deterrent, because often people won't block until they're dead. Like people often don't block
about to be dead, yeah,
until the lethal swing is incoming. But there are often reasons to block ahead of time. Obviously, it insulates you from like surprise removal or whatever, and you know can like modify the political situation in different ways.
Shift the balance of power. Like all of a sudden, the player who is held down by the oof is now free, and it's like now they've got to start attacking them or doing things to them. So it's like you gotta. Do that a bit sooner. Don't wait till the last minute, for sure. Okay.
That's all I wanted to say about politics. There we go.
Which means it's time for everyone's favorite segment, Gut Check.
Gut Check.
Gut Check.
Which Reed surprisingly has the Gut Check for us.
I did. I try not to take the responsibility of these kinds of things onto myself, because I know all too well you just end up doing them forever. So I'm definitely not taking this permanent role.
I am free.
This is still Lyndon's job. But I did have this one in the back of my mind from earlier today, and I wanted to get opinions on it because I think it's sort of an interesting one. So here's the gut check, and ask / we'll talk if it needs clarification. Which commander, so singleton card, is the best / I guess gains the most if you take a color away from their color identity, but that also takes that colored pip out of the casting cost and activated abilities.
Whoa. Wow. Okay.
Wait, so casting cost and activated ability.
Yep.
Well, I mean, there's some efficiency in choosing Najila.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sans red and then just
Honestly,
two
probably. I
colorless.
think maybe it's got to be Najila. Yeah.
I mean,
That's a really good answer.
5-color Sisei is also pretty crazy.
Yeah, I don't think it's comparable to the. Oh, because you ditch white and in the
ditch
activation
white, yeah.
cost? Oh, that's true.
So you know what? How about we just nix 5-color commanders in general and we go for everything?
Yeah.
Because 5 colors
Actually,
is
wait a
too
second.
easy, I think.
Surely it's just Kenrith, right? Like, I guess
So,
no, because
No.
We'll say non 5-color then.
Single command.
I have one that gains
how does
a
hybrid
lot.
mana work?
It becomes non-hybrid mana.
That's actually, it's such a good
you
question.
Could do a
It's such a
pretty
good
sick
question.
mono white Najila.
You mean Winota?
Sorry, yes. I mean Winota.
Yeah, okay.
Also, Tree Drop Winota is so much better
Yeah,
than
it is
it's
way
such
better,
a massive
yeah.
leap. Well, okay, here's a weird one. What about Oswald?
That's pretty good.
Colorless and
Colorless for a single mana? Yeah,
it
and
does
has
activate for free as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But you are in colorless, which is very rough.
Yeah, but Oswald finds artifacts. I don't know.
Am I allowed to say a partner and just?
I thought about partners, but I
you
don't
can
think
do
you want to
partners.
remove colors from partners a lot of the time. I think that hurts more
But
than
like, you definitely could.
like mono blue or green Thrasios. I don't think is that.
All right,
that
guys, stop
great.
brainstorming. Pick your own. Pick your own.
two mana.
It's a-
2 mana
it is a gut check.
Pretty gross.
I can give mine if you guys still want to think for a bit here. Or we
No,
just
I'm going
cut
with
out the thinking.
Oswald. I don't want to think about it too
Oswald?
much longer, but I think Oswald's a reasonable answer.
All right.
I guess I'll, assuming we're taking 5-color off the table, I guess I'll stick with
Yeah.
Winota.
Winota. All right. Mine, and you guys are gonna hate me for this one, is a Sararak because you don't have to discard. You don't have to discount the colored cost anymore. So you just need to discount the colorless
of
cost
course.
until it's. And
I should
it
have been
starts
thinking
at
about
2
why
mana.
was Reed thinking about this question at all. You know, and
I-
clearly.
It starts
I
at 2
don't even
mana.
think that's true. I think that's actually completely wrong.
I think it gains probably some of the most, personally.
No, because you literally can never find any of your pieces.
There are
And-
so many of them.
No, there are.
There are a
Dude, you
lot
lose
of
Heartless
discounters.
Summoning.
Oh no. And you could also just play big mana as well.
How many are there that don't suck? Like 3?
Well, no, because you get to play all the artifact discounters. Because it discounts it to 1 mana, and then you just need 2 of them, and you don't need the additional piece anymore. So you just
Sorry,
like,
what do you mean the artifact discounters?
oh, sorry, not the artifact, like the historic discounter. So there's like a Jorah's assistant or Jorah's familiar, and there are a couple of other like discounters for, I think that kind of stuff.
Oh, actually, okay. I guess I was forgetting about. Like, I was thinking.
Like Hammer Awakening, obviously, but yeah.
No, I was forgetting. You do get what's it? You get both Relic of Legends and what the paddle. I can never remember what it's called.
Honor Shaku.
Honor Worn
Honor Worn
Shaku.
Shaku. There we go.
Yeah, and you get a fair number of discounters as well, just
and
for,
then
like stuff.
Monument, Medallion, Incubator. Yeah, I guess there's
Yeah.
a few more than I thought. I still feel like I also think that like you don't the cards you're gonna hit running through the dungeon are gonna be a lot worse, and I do think that's a problem. Like,
definitely
I think you're 100% in on getting a Sararak down to 0, rather than like just setting up some like pier or whatever.
But it is a lot easier to play the manual Sararak game because it starts at 2.
Yeah. That's very fair. Interesting thought experiment. Okay. Right. Moving on, we still do have a listener question.
Well, okay, so for gut check, I guess we'll do this. We'll do chilling after the listener question. That's fine.
Okay, so listener question. This one comes to us from Rick. If the commander draft rule of any monocolored legend that could be your commander had partner was adopted for commander as a whole, what is the nastiest combination for cEDH you could create out of the current pool of legends?
So it's like still like Godo.
Clarifying question. This is they have partner so that they only work with the current set of partners, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's. Well, I guess, or you could pick any two monocolored commanders, depending on how exactly that's worded.
Yeah, I don't think that would be. First of all, that'd be much. I think that's too wide of a scope to think of right now, off the top of my head. Any two monocolored commanders.
Just they have partner with existing partners.
Yeah. Even then, that's still. My mind immediately goes to like Yisan.
The classic.
Yeah, that's what I was like. Yisan Tymna would be pretty gross.
The classic.
I was thinking like honestly, Yisan. I might, even though it doesn't add much, like Yisan Ishai, like blue and white in Yisan is like kind of exactly what I want. White for stacks, blue for interaction.
You want to give it red for Kiki stuff?
Yeah, I guess, or yeah, you could just do like
Bruce plus Yisan or something.
No, I was actually gonna say you play Yisan Vile Smasher, and then it's just like a turbo deck that sometimes when you're like stacked out or whatever, you just play Yisan and find
discussing things. Yeah. So I was gonna say,
according to the best thing that Yisan does is be a backup plan. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
it's a pretty damn good backup plan if you could have it in other colors.
Yeah. The classic answer is Godo plus like most things. Godo with additional colors gets pretty disgusting, especially if you get like black for like additional rituals plus some tutors and stuff. And then especially if you like put it in the command zone with like, I know there's like the green mana dork, which is like pretty disgusting. That has partner, and then there's like I think there are just like a bunch of like good options to pair it with that just like make it do disgusting things, especially like in a turbo shell where you could just like you could play Grixis Godo if you wanted to.
Oswald will also be sick too.
I've got another good answer. Adding any color, especially if you get to add 2 colors to Orvar.
True. Orvar is insane.
Why, yes, I would like to play Wishclaw Talisman and Dockside Extortionist.
or Urza? I mean, Urza in red with Dockside is like pretty disgusting. Maybe like Magda.
No, Urza's
green and black.
Like, maybe like Urza. Let's see, like Urza Tymna, maybe. Well,
Urza Tymna does sound pretty disgusting, not gonna lie.
It really does, but yeah. I was also just thinking, like, man, I wish. Just a black, and it's just so good. Yeah. Anyway, lots of possibilities there.
Yeah.
And then Rick can
is it
can
bad
clarify.
That I really just want to play Ragavan Tymna.
Ragavan is like the disgusting one for like most of the stuff that's currently playing Rograk, where it's just like, maybe we could just play a dork instead, and it's just like
Ragavan Tymna is so funny.
Just steal stuff from people continuously. Rag Tymna is also just disgusting. I will always have a dork on turn 1 that is also a Tymna attacker that lets me cast Tymna on turn 2.
Okay. Well, Rick, you can update us on if we appropriately answered your question, or if you meant they get just generic partner with another monocolored legend. In which case, resubmit your listener question, and we'll give it some time to think about
for some more content.
Yeah.
We do want to let's shill listener questions and gut checks though. So if you are a listener at all and you want to submit a listener question for a future episode, you can do so on our Discord. So the link should be in the description. If you go to our Discord, there should be a listener question submission channel, and you can go submit listener questions for us to read out on the podcast. And if you're a patron, you actually get priority listener questions, so we'll always try to read yours as soon as possible. If it's a reasonable question, if it can't be answered in the
what is your social security number or your social insurance?
Jokes on them, we don't have social security numbers.
And
cleverly outsmarted.
Patrons also get to submit suggestions for gut checks too. So if you have a burning gut check that you think would be really good for the gut check segment, then you can submit that if you're a patron as well. And as well for gut checks in general, we try to post all of our previous gut checks in the Discord as well with all of our answers, and everybody can vote on which one they would have picked for that gut check. So if you want to go engage and see what everybody else thought and see what everybody else thinks about gut checks and stuff, you should definitely go check that channel out.
Cool. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. If you guys would like to reach out to us with any questions, comments, or concerns, you can contact us on Twitter at IntoNorthPod, via our email, intonorthpodcast@gmail.com, or on our Discord server, the invite link for which can be found in the description for this episode. An extra special thanks to all of our patrons who help cover the expenses for our show and allow us to work towards improving the quality of the podcast. If you too would like to become a patron, we are at patreon.com/IntoNorthPodcast. Thank you, as always, to the band Vox Cadre for our lovely podcast music, and to Nate Slover for our equally lovely podcast logo. Next episode will be out in 2 weeks. Until then, see ya.
Yeah.
Have a good one.